This is a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 396.
You're listening to the 2015 TGO Challenge, sponsored by the Great Outdoors magazine, Handbag Footwear and Fjällräven. Part 8.
It's now midday on Wednesday, one more day to go, and we've left Tarfside for the pleasant walk through the countryside to Edzell and then up to Northwater Bridge, where we'll invade the caravan park there with probably about 50 or 60 tents, and then all evaporate first thing in the morning. But this is the traditional end. It's quite a common ending route for the challenge, primarily because you actually have a fair amount of off-road walking before hitting civilization, as it were, and that horrible straight piece of road that can take you down to Northwater Bridge. But of all the finishing points there is on the challenge, this is probably A, one of the easiest, and B, one of the more rural, to closest possible to the coast. But everyone we've spoken to this morning, conversations we've overheard, all the rest of it really. It's a pleasant morning this morning, a bit of slight breeze and blue skies, but no rain as yet, so a very pleasant morning. And everybody we've been passing by or past us all appear to be reflecting on this year's challenge, this year's crossing, their high points and low points, and some of the adventures and people they've met along the way. As always, I'm walking with Rose and Tony and Lee, of course. So I'm just going to go round the group and just ask for any reflections, really. This is the time we all do it before we're hit once again with reality. So Rose first, how are your thoughts on what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, and I suppose what's coming next?
Well, as always, it's just such a great privilege to walk across the whole landscape. I think it's just fantastic, really. And along with that, the sort of extremes that you go through, from crossing the tops over to get down to Lagan Locks in that horrific storm, and trying to lift my legs up over the heather and the bogs and the wind and rain, and couldn't catch my breath. It was taking it before I could even draw one, to that fantastic quiet up on the ridge, and just sort of quiet breathing and not hearing a soul, and the magnificent sort of panorama laid out before us. I just love the contrasts. It's just, real experience.
So all in all then, you've the weather, the good points and bad points, it's actually been quite a good crossing. Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it. Been a really good crossing. Quite cold. We've had a couple of really cold nights and cold winds, but contrastingly, a couple of days walked in t-shirts. So, yeah.
Be prepared for anything. I'll just speak to Tony and Lee as they make their way towards the next refreshment spot, I guess, which is Edzell. So Lee, your thoughts or reflections on this year's crossing?
Windy.
Yeah?
Very windy, and that's just Tony. But, cold and windy, but pretty much like all challenges, a good mix of Scottish weather, I think.
Yeah. And I know you enjoy your camping. Have you enjoyed the camping this year?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. We had a great camp at, as probably mentioned earlier, Oban, Bothy and Lochmora. That was great. And the one at Glen Tanner was fantastic. It's not a little bit crowded, but everybody was there for the same reasons. Yeah, but it's also nice to add a bed in the hotel in Ballater. That was very welcome as well.
Yes. Your timing for such things is becoming more and more unique. It's very, very clever. So anywhere that's been a battle to get to but really worth it?
Oban Bothy. That was a battle to get to be quite honest. It seemed to be a short distance on the map, but actually on the terrain seemed to take us a long while.
Because that was on our 2013 route, wasn't it? you think it was looking back on it now and having realised what it was like around there, that was really unrealistic, even on a good day, to get to it?
Absolutely, yeah, and totally a waste of going across that way, because it was very difficult. We could see from the opposite side how difficult it is to get to, so there was no need to have ever tried.
But a good spot all the same?
Yeah, very good. Lovely grassy camping, and I laid in my tent till 10, watched the sunset. It was very memorable.
Any sort of short days that allowed a good line as such? Because we've put some good miles in on certain days we've been walking together.
Not so much lies in, but getting in early to have him all was nice. And again, to Ballater was nice, so we can just have a drink and a bite to eat, and then go do your washing. That's always comes as a nice treat to me anyway.
Cool. All right, well, I'll just wait for Tone to catch up. And how about yourself this year, Tony?
Yeah, well,
any reflections on all this?
Well, we start off by saying it's been 2 years since I'd done the challenge, and obviously you start off with enthusiasm. Within an hour of walking, you're thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that goes on for about 3 days. And then you start settling into it and you enjoy the walking. My feet are fine. And the countryside is beautiful. You meet old challenges and new challenges and make new friends. That's very pleasurable. And then for me, obviously, always the high point is, it's never in Monroe, funny enough. It's always the pub. When I get to the pub and you have that Guinness, it refreshes you.
Have you found the reception this year from publicans as well as the coffee houses? Very warm.
Yeah,
very warm.
Well, I'm an easy lad to please, you see, So as long as I get a hot meal when I want it, Guinness, a good breakfast, I'm perfectly happy. You see, so I've got no complaints. It's, as usual, it's all the hospitality's been brilliant. And then the low points, it's obviously the rain and the wet, and walking through bogs and all that, putting up a wet tent, getting out of a wet tent, that's the usual. But the lowest point has got to be when you leave that bloody pub. That is really hard to do, But that's a typical challenge for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So as always, I take it you're not going to do this again?
I'm not going to put my body through this shit ever again. You mark my word. That's it.
So, with that note, I'm sure we'll see Tony in a couple of years' time.
Yeah.
As always. Well, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure walking with you, and certainly a nice day to finish on.
Yeah. And a pleasure walking with yourself and Ray. I must admit, you both looking on fine form. And fitter than ever, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, Rose is carrying all the weight as usual, so
obviously, yes.
That's the only way I can do it, really.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed the chips? Seems to be the only reason you come is to be able to indulge in
yes.
chips.
I should start writing a blog on the chips I've known and loved in Scotland, shouldn't I, really? Well, the wind's picking up, so I'll draw this to a close now and perhaps pick this up
for that.
a bit later.
Well, hello and welcome to my first communication from Montrose. Yes, it's Wednesday afternoon and it's the end of the challenge. A small group of us left our camp spot in the Feterasso this morning and did what Humphrey and I traditionally do now, which is to walk around the perimeter of the forest, which both prolongs the walk a little bit and allows us to make the most of this forest environment. The Feterasso is much maligned, I think, and has a lot of charms. One of the advantages of this route is that we leave the forest really as far east as you can get on the TGO challenge, so it minimises road walking to about 40 minutes, and a good 20 minutes of that is really along tracks and paths as well, not proper roads. But from there it's just a slog into Stonehaven, but it was a nice day, and by the time we reached Stonehaven the sun was shining and it was appreciative. We were walking, Humphrey and I, with Jeff Cantle and also with William from Barbados, and we told them about the wonderful ice cream store there is in Stonehaven. And when we got there and went in, we found the proprietor of the store there. I don't think she's been there the last few times we've been. She was quite fascinated by the TGO challenge and went and got her SLR camera and interviewed us for their new Facebook page. She's also worked, I think, as a bit of a local journalist, and she certainly did a comprehensive interview with us. She wanted to know all about the challenge and the event and so on. And she was so pleased with it because we did tell her, of course, that we walked all the way from the West Coast simply to sample her ice creams. But anyway, I think the ice creams certainly are the highlight of our final day. She was so impressed with this that she insisted that we had double ice creams, and so we toddled off to dip our toes in the sea, absolutely full of ice cream, which was rather pleasant. And then from there it was a quick trip on the bus down to Montrose and TGO challenge control and the end of our trip. So we walked into the Park Hotel, and rather luckily I found that they had a spare room for the evening, so booked into that. And so I'm now sitting here relaxing, washed a bit of gear, and generally just giving myself the time and space to reflect really on the walk so far.
As you can hear, Andy finished a day ahead of us on the Wednesday. While he was absorbing the luxury of ice cream parlours in Stonehaven and the Park Hotel in Montrose, we were still walking from Tarfside via the village of Edzell to the North Waterbridge campsite. The Edzell to North Waterbridge route is not one to look forward to. There's no getting away from the urban reality of the heavy traffic thundering past. Such a stark contrast to the peaceful walk in the morning which started at Tarfside and took us along the bank of the easy flowing river. If you take the obvious path, you can end up walking for several miles along the very straight road, which sadly doesn't have a footpath. Every year, the cars and lorries appear to get faster and closer, so you have to be alert at all times as you circumnavigate the old airfield. However, with a little creative map reading, it is possible to reduce your exposure down to 1 kilometre or 2 by taking a detour along a few paths which cut across fields and down a small side road. Thankfully, we joined Barbara Sanders and Ellie Taylor, who were also being creative along the way, and the easy conversation helped reduce the monotony of this flat terrain. As is often the case, during these dull, uninspiring road sections, when being forced to walk in single file, my mind tends to review the 2-week trip, the experiences we've been through, and how I now feel about some of the gear I chose this time. So, just as Andy did in an earlier episode, I thought I might comment on some key items. So let's start with the tent. As I mentioned before, it was the Vaude Power Lizard 2/3 person, and this was chosen purely due to the forecast of snow. The week prior to leaving, we had our show at Backpacking Light, and most of the new shelters on display hadn't been seam sealed. So I was torn between risking one of the new Lux Hex Peak teepee shelters, or maybe a habitat, or go for something I knew which came ready sealed, as it were, the Lizard or perhaps a Wiki-Up. I did have a week to seal them, of course, but unfortunately it did rain continuously during that week, and the time pressures of sorting things out after the show just didn't allow this to happen. As it all turned out in the end, I feel I could have taken any of the Lux shelters as they were, and we would have been fine. But of course, a decision had to be made, so we went to play safe with the Lizard, which was the lightest of the selection and also the smallest pack size. Plus, it could be pitched as one, which many challengers will know can make all the difference to getting out of the weather. Initially, we thought the space was a bit cramped and the door slightly restrictive to get through, but over the 2 weeks we grew to appreciate the internal space, and the door, when propped open with a pole, offered a good cooking space out of the wind. The couple of nights we had the heavy 50-mile-an-hour gusts did concern me when one of the end poles, which took the full force, started to flex under pressure. However, after some imaginative reinforcing with gaffer tape and a walking pole, this troubled us no longer. So, all in all, equally as good as the smaller 1/2-person version, and I'd highly recommend it. We slept on Neo Airs once again, Rose on a 3/4 and me on a full length, over which we used the Backpacking Light 3-season wilderness quilts. Although I've been using quilts for years, Rose had some concerns initially about drafts and potentially feeling cold, as petite women have a tendency to do so. However, she soon confirmed that she slept as warm and as comfortably as when using her favourite Rab Quantum sleeping bag, and so gave it the big thumbs up. Obviously, during the very cold spells getting towards dawn, we both added our extra insulation when the frost hit, but this usually stayed on only for a short while. She is now another convert to quilts. I chose the new Gossamer Gear Robic Mariposa as my pack this time, and it was easy to see why this design had become so popular with backpackers doing something like the challenge. I noticed a considerable number of others using this version and the previous Dyneema version, all of whom extolled the virtues of the external pocket system. The one large side pocket will take most shelters complete, and of course a shelter is the first thing to come out of your pack when you set up camp, and the last thing to pack away in the morning. So even when it's raining hard, it was still possible to organise yourself without taking too much water into the shelter at night with you, or soaking the contents of the pack in the wet mornings. Also, the large expandable mesh front pocket was a godsend for stuffing all the various clothing you might need during the day, and it held absolutely everything I needed. I guess I carried somewhere between 9 and 12 kilos generally, depending on the food parcel I collected, of course. The bag was never full to absolute capacity, however it does need to be above a certain volume for it to have some structure to compress against due to the nature of the top pocket or the top flap. Otherwise, the pack has no structure, something that wasn't a problem on this trip, of course, due to the range of equipment we took, and the capacity was absolutely bang on. All in all, it carried really well and offered some good attachment points for me to clip on my Crocs, which I picked up in Glasgow. Now, Crocs are cheap and very useful, and a good way to rest your tired feet at the end of the day, but they're notoriously difficult to keep inside your pack. The cooking was again a little gas peak ignition stove, another favourite which we've had for years. Again, we chose the gas cooking option due to the expected weather. Otherwise, I would have probably used the little Avenue alcohol burner inside the honey stove, as I've done before. However, safety was an important consideration with the weather in mind, and so the gas was the better option, taking into account the size of the lizard doorway and the limited headroom it offered, of course, if you'd had an alcohol stove in there. We found the Avenue double nesting 1300 and 900 pan set offers us a whole variety of cooking options, which we've again used before, and they also stack nicely inside each other. And then inside that, we also had a Avenue 400 mug, the stove, 2 folding sporks, various cooking tools, and the pan cleaning items with some bio soap. All of which was packed inside the double pot cosy and then stashed away inside the pack.
The Outdoors Station has been producing independent audio and video podcasts since 2005, reaching an audience of millions around the world. If you have any feedback, suggestions or sponsorship inquiries, please email us directly on info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
My clothing this year was the same old Montane favourites I've used for many a time, and which have never let me down. However, we did try the new Montane Promino tops, and I mixed this with some other merino base layers from Chocolate Fish and Embers. I would say the Montane Promino was certainly lighter and maybe slightly warmer than the other merino tops. There was also no evidence of pong either, so that too has now entered the favourites drawer. Everyone we've spoken to recently has said how hard it is to get hold of Innovate shoes this year, and I would agree. Since they sold out to an American company last year, or was it the year before, there's been more of a problem finding, let alone buying, the old walking favourites, the infamous TGOCs, which are no longer made. I think Colin Ibbotson, when I saw him, told me he bought the last 15 pairs in his size when he realised they were being discontinued. I eventually managed to get hold of this year's Innovate Rocklight 295 model. Like the old model, they fitted my feet perfectly, were comfortable and very grippy on those slippy, muddy slopes. However, by the end of the trip, they had begun to fall apart either side of the toe at the hinge. I returned them disappointed to Runner's World when I got back, and they agreed that the model 295 was considerably inferior and gave me a full refund. Good customer service, of course, but what do I replace them with? I purchased some Cascadas back in February on Andy's suggestion, but found them nowhere near as grippy on slopes, something he found out to his cost on the challenge, as you've already heard. I also picked up some heavier Salomons, which have a very aggressive sole, but they don't drain the water around the rand, leaving me squelching with every footstep. Everyone I know who has used TGOCs or Innovates are struggling for a lightweight, non-Gore-Tex, grippy replacement walking shoe. So if you have any suggestions, please email us at the Outdoor Station. The two key items, as mentioned before in this series, were certainly the pot cozy and the bothy bag. The bothy bag is near the end of its life now. I've been using it hard for quite a few years, not only as intended as the emergency shelter out of the rain, but as a ground sheet, a floor protector, a dry place to store packs, or a kneeling pad, a whole variety of things. When we were above Lag and Knox, it certainly came into its own as an emergency shelter, just to get out of the weather and collect our thoughts and get our breath back. The double-skinned pot cosy kept our food piping hot for well over half an hour. It was a pleasure to eat to the bottom of the pan and not have to enjoy cold sludge. A simple but very effective accessory, which I notice most challengers now use. Finally, the Route Buddy mapping facility on my iPhone was super help a couple of times when we had a selection of track options. We tried not to rely on it, preferring to keep our map reading skills as sharp as we could, but without doubt it was comforting to know it was at hand when we wanted secondary confirmation. Like all GPS systems in cars these days, it would be so easy to totally refer to it and rely on it. However, a small screen doesn't quite replace the dynamics of a full landscape like a paper map does for us. So it was a very welcome tool to have in the pack, but not one I want to allow myself to rely on if I can help it. Having said that, it was quick to load when we first switched the iPhone on and then booted the software up. Faster, in fact, than a couple of standalone GPS systems which people had with them that we were walking with at various stages. The screen detail was superbly easy to read, and we soon recognised exactly where we were, as it were. And of course, it's very affordable, so it does make it very hard not to use it more often. However, just because I'm old school, I want to try and keep referring to the map and use it as a secondary confirmation system. But all in all, it worked faultlessly throughout the trip. So we eventually arrived with Barbara and Ellie at the North Waterbridge campsite and found about 40 other challengers in various stages of setting up camp. The mood was fairly jovial and light-hearted, and during the evening a number of tables were gathered together to wish Lindsay Pooler a happy birthday, complete with singing, a cake and cards. at one nearby tent, I got into conversation with another overseas challenger, Michael Zimmermann from Stuttgart.
It's the second now. They did it, the first one in 2012.
And how is it different from the 2012 one?
Well, we had 2012. It was the first week was winter, the second was summer, so it switched just in between, and it was more mixed up. The weather was colder this year, and I was in very bad training condition, so it was much harder for me the first days.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning then. How did you hear about the actual event itself?
I was on a walk in the Neustadt, and we met some challengers starting there at Inverie, at Malake. And in fact, it was an old lady, Barbara Pierce.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know her?
Yeah,
Head Roy Barbara.
Yeah.
And we met her on the way. She overtook us up the hill.
Really?
And in the evening, it was horrible weather, so we chose a B&B, and she was there. And so we sat there, and we talked, and she told us about the challenge. And so we thought, it might be nice and interesting to do it. Yeah?
Okay.
So
how does it differ from the walking that you have in Germany?
Yeah, it's much more remote. You can walk wherever you want in Scotland. You can wild camp, and it's all not possible in Germany. In Germany, it's much more. You have to stay on the path, and nearly everything is signposted. Navigation is totally different to here. So, and the landscape. You have no PTAC in Germany. Yeah?
Right. Okay.
So it's totally different. It's not better or worse. It's different. It's just different. Yeah. I did a lot of walking in Germany either. I did a lot of walking in the Black Forest and Swabian woods and so on. But it's a totally different surrounding and way to walk. Yeah.
I mean, the challenge takes different formats. For some people, it's walking the distance. Some people, it's carrying the weight or climbing the mountains. Others, it's navigation. But an overseas perspective is always interesting to understand more from your point of view and your countrymen. What is so different that makes it such a unique event?
For me, it's the social thing. On the one hand, you meet a lot of people doing the same. On the other hand, you walk on your own, and it switches from time to time. So that's a special thing, I think, that you walk on your own, but meet on the way people doing the same, in the same state of mind. So we have a talk, a chat, and walk for a few miles together, and then you leave again each other and meet again at some other place, meet other people. And so it's a very nice social thing, I think. Social event on the one hand, but not being together all the time, but being on your own. And so that makes the... Yeah.
It makes it more unique, doesn't it?
Yeah,
certainly unique.
It's really unique.
Have you any other similar events like this in Germany, or anything you've heard about at all?
I don't know. I never did another organized walk thing ever, so don't know. I don't. There are several walks in Germany, I think, but not in this kind. Not such a big number of people walking for 2 weeks. There are walking events just for a weekend or whatever, or 25-hour walks, such things, but. Such a thing, long distance walk, don't know, never heard about.
And would you describe it then in your experience and the experience of your friends that you walk with back home? Would you describe it as a tough walk, a really tough walk, or?
It is really tough. For as I do not walk regularly each weekend or whatever, so it's just from the training thing, it's tough, and on the other hand, it's also tough to walk 2 weeks, day after day after day, such long distance, and even the ground, the surface is sometimes very, very hard. It's pathless, it's peat-hack, it's boggy and no paths and very slow going, and it's very different to walking at home, even with this big backpack. And
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so very quick questions then. What has been your best piece of equipment and your worst piece of equipment? What hasn't performed how you hoped it to?
Well, I think the equipment so far as I have it is good. I like this tent. I like this air mat. It's an expert sun mat.
Nothing's failed on you?
The sleeping bag was very good, but too warm and never too cold in this.
Okay.
So
everything's been good.
The only thing I have to think about is some shoes for river crossings.
Right.
So
you
it's
use
not-
boots normally, do you?
I walk in the boots normally, but then feet are wet, and so I have to think about some lightweight shoes for river crossings that even are for the evenings in the tent suitable, and you get no wet feet when you walk through the grass. That's the thing why I have these Crocs with me.
Yes, yes.
But they are not suitable for river crossings.
no.
So that's perhaps the thing. All the other things, some.
And what sort of food, out of interest, did you bring with you? Did you bring dehydrated packet food, or did you buy
Yeah,
food?
but the normal supermarket things, not the special outdoor equipment
Right.
thing, but just from the supermarket.
Okay.
The chicken curry or rice and whatever, and that works.
Excellent. Okay. And the final question, and then, is what has been your best moment, and what has been your worst moment?
Best and the worst. I think this year the worst moment was on the second day or on the third day. It was very, very wet, and I was at the limit of my power. Yeah. So I think that was the worst. It was raining, it was cold, and I was. If there would have had happened anything that would unexpected, that perhaps I would have been to my limit. Yeah. So
Right.
it was just a little too much because I was not trained. I had no possibility to do some walks in this year so far. So it was.
You were exhausted.
Yeah. And then the best, meeting people all the time, nice evenings in bothies and at camp spots and so on, and just the whole thing, the whole social thing. On the first challenge, I really made 2 friends. I still have contact to them, and so And the worst thing perhaps on my walking in Scotland, not with the TGO, was that I had an accident and broke my ankle several years ago. So I was on my own. So if you think about outdoor gear and things like that, what is still not solved is the problem of communication. I had a satellite phone with me, but it was a very unsuitable thing. It saved me in this case, but there should be something more easier to handle, which has a safe connection. For solo walkers, I think, because I experienced in that solo walking can very fast can be a very dangerous thing. Everything went good in the end, but could have been different. So I think that that communication thing is perhaps one where
one problem
somebody
to solve.
should work on.
But at least it didn't happen during the challenge. That happened some other time.
No, it was not at the challenge. It was just a solo walk in Scotland of me. And the challenge, everything. I think it's just the state of mind that people are in. If you meet, they are all nice and friendly, and it's just like walking with friends.
Sharing
all
the
time.
pain. They're sharing the pain.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, hello again. I'm in Montrose. I've moved out of my room, but the hotel have allowed me and some of the challengers to camp in their garden at the back and to use their showers and bathroom facilities, so long as we buy breakfast tomorrow morning on Friday, which is fine by me. It's a strange day this Thursday. The walkers are still coming in, and it's rather nice to hang around the bars and to meet and greet people when they come in. And there's a real kind of end of an adventure atmosphere and a beginning of a party atmosphere as well. But as I sit here this afternoon, really just preparing for this evening's meal, there are a lot of people here who are looking quite reflective, really, and just taking stock, I think, of everything that they've done over the last 2 weeks. I don't always have a final day in Montrose, but quite often I do. And for me, it's part of the readjustment, really, back into the world again. Tomorrow is a long train journey for me back to Birmingham. And it always takes a bit of effort to get back into the swing of things, I think. But for the moment, there's still plenty of time to sit and reflect and just think about the highs, the lows, the spectacular scenery that we've been through, the really dreadful days with the wind, the rain, thunder and lightning as we had this time. And basically just to reflect on the variety that always is the Scottish Highlands. And we're also preparing, of course, for this evening's celebratory meal at the Park Hotel. I don't always go to the meal itself, but I am going this year, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun as ever. And another chance to say goodbye to old friends before we head back home tomorrow. So that's it for the TGO Challenge 2015. It was an interesting crossing. Maybe for me not the most adventurous of routes, but I think I'll do something a bit more exciting next year. It wasn't particularly cold on this crossing, I didn't think, although the wind that we had gave the feeling of things being cold. We had some bad weather, but never more than 2 or 3 days, and that was always preceded and followed by some sunny weather. So that was a nice bit of variety. It's not one of those challenges where virtually every day is a very difficult day. And by and large, it's been good for us, I think. Anyway, that's it from me, and I hope this has helped you think about your perhaps a dream, maybe to one day walk the TGO Challenge, or if you're a challenger, think about some other alternative routes. But I'm going to leave you now and just have a little lie down and a nap and a little reflective think before it's time for all of the celebrations of this evening.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk. Join us next time as the journey across Scotland continues on the TGO Challenge.